Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for tonight's conversation. My name is Violet Saxon, and I'm the gallery assistant and archivist at White Columns. It's a pleasure to welcome you all to tonight's conversation between Denisse Griselda Reyes and Tamara Khasanova. This event has been organized on the occasion of the exhibition Shapeshifter with a Heavenly Secret. The exhibition is the 23rd installment of White Columns Online, an ongoing series of exhibitions in which White Columns invites guest curators to organize an online show drawn exclusively from our curated artist registry. The White Columns Registry has existed since the 1980s, originally taking the form of a slide library. The platform is now hosted on our website at whitecolumns.org and currently displays the work of several hundred artists not affiliated with a commercial gallery in New York City. This exhibition, A Shapeshifter with a Heavenly Secret, borrows its title from Denisse Griselda Reyes' video piece and is a selection of works from the curated artist registry that offers to take you on a journey of shape-shifting, metamorphosis, alterations, and changes to the passages of time, memory, mind, and the body. The exhibition's poetics gesture towards different stages of one's transformation as they move in dialogue with one another. It's my pleasure to now introduce Denisse and Tamara. Denisse Griselda Reyes is a research-based visual artist, filmmaker, and shapeshifter. Straddling the lines of assimilation, refuge, and self-preservation, Denisse's current work interrogates the boundaries of representation by engaging with memory. They use nostalgic materials like family photographs, texts from their grandmother, found footage, and high-8 film as the basis of their research and archival practice. They collage these materials to recreate a personal mythology and historical assemblage of their Salvadoran history. They received an MFA in Visual Arts, New Genres from Columbia University, and a BA in Art History from Wesleyan University. They currently live and work in Brooklyn, New York. Tamara Khasanova is an independent curator, researcher, and writer from Ukraine and Uzbekistan, currently living in Brooklyn, New York. She holds an MA degree in curatorial practice from the School of Visual Arts and a BA in graphic and media design from University of the Arts London. So without further ado, I am going to turn it over to Tamara and Denisse.
Thank you, Violet. Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us this evening. And thank you again, Violet, for such a generous introduction and also for all the help with putting this talk together. For those who don't know and join us a little later, my name is Tamara Khasanova, and I was one of the curators of the most recent online exhibitions for White Columns Online. And today I'm very pleased to be in conversation with Denisse Griselda Reyes, whose video piece, Shapeshifter with a Heavenly Secret, was part of the show. And on a number of occasions, Denisse and I had a chance to meet and have conversations and discussions about their artistic practice. So it's very exciting to be able to share the fruits of these conversations with all of you. Yeah, and without further ado, I'll pass the mic to Denisse, who will introduce their piece, and we will dive into more in-depth conversation about it. And in the meantime, I'll also share my screen with you. Okay.
Everyone, it's nice to see some of you guys and new faces and some old friends as well. My name is Denisse Griselda Reyes, of course, and my pronouns are they, them. Today, I really wanted to talk a little bit about this piece that's in the show, A Shapeshifter with the Heavenly Secret. I kind of wanted to pull you guys through into the process, into the materiality of the work, and also some of my ideas in creating an alter ego or a shapeshifter. The voice in this piece, it emerged alongside one of my alter egos who explores their lived experience through archival footage. And you'll see some of the footage that I've been working with, that is the home video footage of my family. And the piece goes through some autobiographical events, like my uncle dying from COVID, my dad crossing the border, and some things with my brother also, and his relationship to my family. So I'm excited, and I think the best way to start is probably to see a bit of the footage first.
I like to think of myself as a shapeshifter with a heavenly secret, or trickster figure trying to bridge the breadth of what is not really to be seen and this unbearable world. It's not even a secret, really. It's just the things that you decide not to look at. I'll look at them. It doesn't take people longer than 30 minutes to tell me their secrets. I really don't even think of this as a talent or a manipulation. I think that if we were to sit in front of each other, you couldn't help it either. I, on the other hand, do not tell people what I'm really feeling. I've always been great at smiling, and when I was younger, I was called bubbly and bright a lot.
You look so beautiful.
I'm not younger anymore, but people still call me bubbly. That's kind of my secret. I've always had this need to fight. Fight to show who I am and fight to be understood. What isn't a secret is that I like to be seen.
Here comes hip-hop/ballet princess.
I learned quickly that if I see me in you, then I free me. When I was younger, I used to try really hard to be like other people, and I would copy them. I used to wake up hoping I had transformed into a basic bitch. Please, God, give me straight hair. Please, God, make my legs straight. Please, Jesus, take away these curves. Now, I know that what I am looking for will always show itself to me. The last time I was in Berlin, I forced myself into loneliness, and then my apartment filled with flies.
She chooses can number 1. All right, Denise, face the crowd. Open up can number 1, and let's see what Denise gets.
Hey, I think we can go back to the slides, this kind of with a title. And I hope we could make this kind of like a two-part conversation, maybe discuss just a concept in general behind the video piece, and then maybe jump into a more sort of like technical conversation about the medium, and then see how these things overlap if we have time. But I thought I could start by asking you a question about the title, and specifically, how did the name of the piece come about? I think we talked about it during our first studio visit back in January before the exhibition went live, but I thought it would be helpful to sort of have this introduction for the members of the audience too.
Okay, I think that the title came about actually a few years ago, maybe like in 2015, when I started to create my alter ego, Griselda, which is my middle name. And I created this character that was an artist like me, also experiencing some of the same events and memories that I was experiencing, but a character that was much more indignant and bold and dressed as the Virgin Mary, goes to museums and disrupts them, someone who had all of these negative characteristics, but also was very confident in certain ways. So I sort of created this suit of armor back in 2015. And then as I started to make more work with that character, I started to realize that I was missing a more genuine or real voice. And that's when I started looking at the home video footage that I've been collecting for my family. And I'd always been so interested in this footage. I would watch it even when I was a kid. But I guess I realized that in a way I could be both. I could be this really indignant, bold, excessive character, and I could also have this voice that was a truth teller, or like a soothsayer. And in a way, I think like that's what The Secret is about. It's this idea that when I'm one of these characters, like when I'm Griselda, nobody knows that I'm also this other character, this real, genuine narrator. And when I'm the narrator, no one quite knows that I'm also this, I also have this alter ego.
Yeah, I think you included the slide with the image of Griselda. So if you could talk about sort of the visual aesthetics of this particular image and why did you present her as the Virgin Mary in this case?
I think for me, I grew up Catholic. I think that's really important in terms of the way that I approach a lot of my artistic practice, actually. Like I can be very strict with rules. And one of the rules that I created for Griselda was that she had to have these autobiographical qualities. And she had to experience the things that I experienced, but I was able to make these fictions for them. And I just love this image because it's like the Virgin smoking a cigarette. And I felt like that really encapsulated a lot of the paradoxical qualities of this character that I created. She's like neither a virgin or a whore. She's somewhere in between these two things. And in general, I'm really interested in that space in between. The space in between that, like being a virgin or a whore, but also the space between my alter ego and myself, and that distance that I get to create when I make and put all of these things into a different person.
Yeah, I'm curious, how do you think that she developed over the time of creation, specifically as Shapeshifter? Because this piece touches upon such very loaded questions of like specifically childhood and remembering and kind of trying to make sense of your own identity. And also kind of the role of you as a person within the framework and structures of your own family, and the loaded history of also like immigration stories that we kind of discussed before. So how do you think about the kind of like the timeline and what was added throughout, and specifically in this piece?
I think that's a great question. I think part of this process, like in creating a different object where I could insert a lot of these characteristics or parts of my personality that I felt I couldn't really contain in some way. In a way, I think that it's really related to a lot of my history and like my parents' history and the way that they have experienced the world. I think that the home video footage also is this way for me to connect with my family and like find an avenue to see where I am in the midst of this collection of archival footage. That's to say also that there is a ton of footage. I have hundreds of hours of footage that my family has made. And I think in a way I was also connecting to my father, who's the person who's recording all of this footage over years. And in a way, like, he made my job really easy because he was really great at it. And I think that in a way, my dad, my mom, and even like my grandmother are artists, but didn't have the freedom to do so in the way that I do. And I feel like the connection to this work was a way to like bring those stories to the surface. But also a way, I think, something about this footage too that I find myself doing a lot is I find myself really searching and exploring the footage and trying to find these secrets and these overlaps between like images and between different locations, different settings. And I think in a way I'm also looking for like my family's secret and like an answer as to why or how I am the way that I am.
Yeah, I think it kind of like naturally leads me to a next question, which is if you can talk about some of the challenges that you encountered while working with this family, with the family archives, and yeah, this interesting dynamic between sort of some of the work that you've made where you are the person who's in charge of script writing and sort of developing your own story versus sort of revisiting the childhood memories and through the lens of your dad's recording you as a person, as this being in the room. Yeah.
You know, something that I actually haven't thought about until right now was thinking about how his gaze is really loving and it makes the editing process really easy for me comparatively to working with my alter ego, who I do like these bigger productions with her where, you know, there's 10 people on set, we have like makeup, all of this. And in a way, like I'm realizing that while like approaching this archival footage can be really difficult for me, because like it just is hard sometimes to see how things have changed so much after so many years. I also think that it's like an easy entryway for me to look at myself and to sort of understand my own identity within these things. But yeah, I think of like his like the actual material being these tapes being something that unless like I put them and I have this very long process of digitizing them, unless I do that in a way they're sort of lost. It's not quite like having like digital video anymore where you can find it on your iCloud somehow.
Mhm.
I really have to look for them. And sometimes I like go like, you know, some of them are really boring. Like I've seen my 5th grade concert, like band concert, and I had to watch the whole thing to make sure there wasn't anything juicy in it. But other times, like a lot of this footage that we're looking at, like it's like my communion and I remember these days. So there's something interesting about it to me.
When was the kind of the first time that you saw and kind of realized that it is you in the video and sort of this conscious perception of the self that I think kind of like also leads to development of alter ego probably later, right? As a way to also, as you said, process this information, this loaded information.
I don't know if I quite recognize myself yet, is the truth, I think. I think the whole process is, and this is what I think about an archival process, is that it's just always changing. And in that way, like I just never really know who I am in certain ways. Like some days I do wake up like as Griselda, and then other days I don't need her at all. And sometimes I don't need her for months and months and months. Um, but yeah, I guess I don't know. I think that's the crazy part is that there's so many angles, there's so many cameras and like somewhere I'm there.
Yeah, that's also interesting because I think like she helps to highlight sort of because basically the way we see her in specifically this film, this piece is through the narration part, because it becomes like a third character. Where I feel like they're a character of your dad, they're a character of you yourself as a child, and then that like a third meta character that is a narrator specifically. And you mentioned that she has this like cunning, arrogant, indignant nature to her, and then it's almost like if we go back to the idea of trickster figure within sort of mythological or folklore traditions, it's usually someone who possesses knowledge that is not accessible to us as the audience. And she plays like this trick on us as a storyteller because she's in charge of the story. So I wonder, if you have any points on how to like unpack that, and how did you structure that? How intentional was it? With making this piece specifically.
Yesterday I was rewatching some Joseph Campbell lectures on like the trickster figure and mythology, and he said something that I just loved, which I feel like resonated with this work, which was that the trickster figure disrupts, is like they cause a disruption and they're a catalyst for change in a way. And I think like when I'm thinking of working with these memories and working with these like events or sometimes really traumatic events that have happened to me in my life, like I think of these characters as ways to disrupt them and like move between those spaces. And yeah, I think that I love that I have a character that is indignant. I think everyone low key wants to play the villain in the movie, and I get to do that sometimes. And even like when I was listening to the narration right now, I realized that in the beginning, there's this like way of like drawing you into this almost what seems like to be very true and real story. And then, she has to include something about being a basic bitch or, I don't know, just something that's always a quip. And I like that about a trickster figure, that there's this idea that the joke is on you, and that unless you understand this moral, you're not in on the joke, really. But also that the shapeshifter and the trickster figure can sometimes get caught up in the joke itself, and it can sort of come back to them or revert back to them in a certain way.
Do you want to move to the slide with your grandmother, or maybe talk about this particular quote actually before we jump into maybe talking about your grandmother? The rupture, sort of the idea of rupture within your work. I think that's actually kind of like the second part of the conversation, I guess, but it comes across, apart from the narration, like I see it in the splitting of the screen specifically. And I was thinking about it, whether it was intentional, whether you did that intentionally or not. But, there's like a gap in between these two mirrors that you present us with. Sometimes they're similar, but sometimes they're completely different images. So I wonder if that like idea of rupture, of scabbing is also kind of like part of comes through for you as in the media of the film itself, apart from the story and narrative.
Yes, I think definitely. I think that the split screen is definitely on purpose. I felt like watching one screen was almost too nostalgic, and it felt really romantic to me in a way, having one screen versus two, because I think the split of the screen sort of introduces this potential other event or this other happening at the same time. And yeah, I think also that I'm just really interested in splitting in terms of like psychoanalysis and psychology, where and you wrote a little bit about this in the introduction to the show, where Catherine Malibu talks a lot about where you could split without even knowing, and how potentially that's the scariest thing, is what happens if you split and you have no idea that you've split at all. Does it count as a split? And yeah, I feel like a lot of my work deals with that. And in fact, there's a slide with the newspaper article that I've just been thinking about so much, where one of the things that I've been doing recently is like looking at all the pictures, because my dad's the video person, he's the video artist, and my mom's the photographer, and she just has boxes and boxes of photos of our family, starting from like as old as the 60s. And I had never like learned how my father's dad died. Really, like no one talks about it in my family. And at the bottom of this box, I found these newspaper articles that finally explained a bit of what occurred. And I texted my dad yesterday, and because I was still a little bit confused, like I wasn't sure if he was there, because I was under the impression that he was there when his dad died. Basically, as you can see, like terrorists, heavily armed terrorists just shot at his vehicle, at his father's vehicle, and killed him in front of his family. And I had always been under the impression that my father was there. And yesterday when I texted him, he told me that he had been in the United States for 6 months. And I realized that, first of all, like I had this fictionalized mythological story for my dad, where that he was there and he had experienced it. And then all of a sudden there was this split now where he actually was never there. And now his character in some way is split from the event and also has a totally different story. Now, like I think of it as like, what's the guilt, or like what are the feelings of not being present? And I think about that within my own work too, where while like having an alter ego can feel really empowering, at the same time, you create a distance between yourself and there's this object that gets to live separately from you. And I find these sort of like, I don't want to call them coincidences, but these parallels between my story and my family's story. And I guess it's what I'm looking for too, when I'm looking through all of the footage and all of the materials.
Yeah, I'm interested actually in sort of going back to the slide with this question of splitting, but at the end, you kind of say, I used to think healing was for losers. So how, if you can kind of like unpack that, just because with Malibu's theory, we like kind of like don't recognize that splitting happened and we almost like move on. We just have to deal with the consequences of it. But here you almost take this agency back, and I wonder how like the story unravel after you accept that, yes, maybe there is this part of you that is open to healing, and you recognize the rupture that happened. I thought it was just like such a powerful thing to and almost end with this piece, because it's very much closer to the end of the video.
It's true. I used to think healing was like not cool, and like I didn't think it was possible also. And I think part of it like reminds me of Melanie Klein's like theories, where she talks a lot about the despair in reparation, and this idea that you can have this fantasy of being able to fix things, like fix your parents' problems, fix your family's things. And that going through that is sort of this feeling of despair. And I think that I was in a place at one point when it did feel like that to me. And yeah, I think I've definitely shifted in a certain way from that idea. I think first of all, there is like there are limited ways potentially to solve like transgenerational trauma. And uh, in a way, I think I have hope potentially. I have like some hope in doing so. But I do think that something about working with all of this is that really, in a way, it is really separate from my family in the sense of I'm really trying to see how to fix my connections with these things, rather than trying to fully understand where they're coming from, for example. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm also thinking that, we kind of talked about shapeshifting and trickstery as your own methodology to grapple with all of this. And instead of just relying on re-examining and like reenacting mythological stories or fables from the past, you use this as a way to make sense of your own present and past and future potentially. So this like channel and a temporal channel. And I wonder how did that come about as a methodology for you? As something where you remove yourself just from like the kennel of mythology, but and folklore, but reinvent it with a contemporary sort of vision for your own artistic practice and for your life, because it seems like they don't exist separately. Your life is very much part of your artistic practice.
Yes, it gets me in trouble sometimes, I think, too. It gets really close. But yeah, I mean, I think of the trickster figure and I think of Griselda as this contemporary trickster figure, like a trickster figure who's like morality, deals with identity and representation in some way. And I think I chose this methodology because I think of the trickster figure also as this person who puts things into action, so is a creator in a way. And I think that's why it made so much sense with my artistic practice, was because I felt as though the creation, like even the idea of like archiving all of this like footage, archiving all of the photographs, like it is taking action with these events and these histories that if, I could have these conversations with my family, but in a way they just disappear. So I think of it almost as like this document also, like this is proof that I exist. This is proof that my family exists. This is proof of our lineage, and the lineage that I come from. But at the same time, like I really want to challenge the immigration story, and I want to challenge this romantic idea of exactly what an immigration story looks like. There's a lot of splitting. There's a lot of pain and despair. And yeah, like we talked about earlier, is sometimes it's really hard for me to look at some of the footage. There's footage of my brother that's really difficult for me. And it's not anything crazy. It's him like getting ready for school. And I like in those moments of collecting the footage, like I allow myself to miss him. And yeah, and then I create something from that feeling.
Can you just talk about, I believe this is your grandmother, right? In the right corner, I believe this is right. Yeah. Yeah, I was also, again, going back to the idea of shapeshifter and trickster figure, thinking a lot about sort of the immigration story of your grandma specifically that you kind of touch upon also in the film, and just in general conversations and like body of work that you're currently working with for sort of your other preparations. And have you ever thought, we think about trickster figure as a kind of this character that is also subverting the rules or existing between mortality and immortality, between heaven and earth, etc., etc. And your grandma, who like was able to cross the border twice, for example, she kind of has that similar agency of being able to trick the system to be able to survive, to bring her family here. And yeah, have you ever thought about this almost like a lineage to an extent, or is it of the ideas passing on to each other? I know that you guys are close, so I thought it would be interesting to hear about that.
I've kind of been thinking about this all day. Like I've been wondering, okay, is she a shapeshifter in her own right? And I think so. I mean, something really interesting is when you cross the border, they call you coyotes, which is coyote. And of course, there's like this long history of like indigenous trickster figures, and one of them being a coyote, which also I think originates from like Western US, which is like where she immigrated to, like LA. Um, and the first time that she crossed the border, she memorizes the way. And then the second time she's able to return and then come back and save 8 other people. So she came with my mom and like a pregnant woman, and she has like this gift. I don't know if she like realizes how much she's changed history in doing what she did. And all day I've been sort of thinking about that, where I'm like, I feel my first inclination is that in a way she didn't have the freedom to shapeshift potentially in the way that I can now. And if she did, I think I think she would be a very different character than my character. Like I think of her as more like an elephant, almost like someone who travels long distances with like this great emotional power. And yeah, so I guess in a way I do think of her as the shapeshifter, like shapeshifting into an animal potentially. But yeah, other than that, I definitely don't think of her quite as a trickster figure. I think she is really genuine in everything that she does too.
Yeah, that's a good point, that deciphering those two ideas, I guess, and dissecting them. Yeah, I'm also curious about, you talked a little bit about mythologizing your own family, like, and I was thinking a lot about Roland Barthes in that relation of myth making to an extent and creating and being aware of an object or a thing as a cultural construct. So I wonder, what are some of the visual clues that and visual syntax that you're picking up in, specifically while you're going through your family archive, and how that helps you to then synthesize and use that for your own approach and later on. If you and you also like, let me know if you want to move to another slide, maybe.
I mean, I just love that picture of my dad because I think his artistry comes across and he just looks so cool to me. And you can see my mom in this picture. And like something that I notice, potentially one of the symbols, is how my parents are always together somehow in every single picture. Like my mom is back there, she's present, and his imagination always. And but yeah, I'm thinking of the slide with the many shapeshifter images. I think it's closer to the end, because in a way, like I realized that there ends up being this color story to a lot of the, like there's a color story to my life, and there's a palette, and like there's this green that comes up everywhere. That's like the color of the walls in El Salvador. That's also the color of the walls in my brother's bedroom. And there's these yellows that are everywhere. Like my mom seems to love the color yellow. Yeah, I guess what I do is I look for these like overlapping, like what I consider to be like these really overlapping symbolic gestures. There's something about the beach. There's something about like these particular shots that my dad would take. Yeah, I guess.
Or
Mhm.
sorry to interject, or even as you said, you know, this like image within an image that comes up in a lot of frames, and also the cakes and the over decorated sort of elements of some of the celebrations. And I'm thinking about even like how you in one of the like very early frames that I love, by the way, where you juxtapose yourself in almost like this white dress next to those roses that we see in the corner. Yeah, and also we apparently hit 40 minutes mark, so we just have to be aware that we have like 5 more minutes. So yeah, if I want to add anything to that.
I guess thinking about Barth's also and this creation of the myth, like I also think of the idea of the punctum. And like when I look at each frame, like I try to find that one thing that has no symbolic or like, yeah, like no, it's a symbol, but it has no relationship necessarily to anything at all. But somehow like carries this meaning. And you're right, there's definitely lots of screens within screens and rectangles within rectangles, paintings within each of the home videos that I get to work with.
Yeah, I'm also, just wanted to ask you about your practice in general, sort of how you think about your involvement with filmmaking versus your relationship to painting. And I know that you're also interested in sculpture. And on this slide, we see that there is this image of your grandmother and also a painted image of your grandmother. So do you think that there is a kind of like a hierarchy, or they add to one another in terms of the mediums? Yeah, in that sense.
Yeah, I think I think of painting as like an act of care in a way, because there's time. And in a way, I guess I think of video in the same sense because you create the time. Um, but yeah, I guess the way that I think of these images too is I haven't quite figured out how I want to paint them and how I want them to exist, because I don't find it quite as interesting when I reproduce the exact same thing as the picture. Um, but yeah, like I think part of it, it's funny because I was originally trained as a painter, but my love is in video, or like my heart, I guess, in a way. And yeah, I think that they overlap in the sense of also the white canvas and like the idea of like having a rectangle that you're working with. Um, yeah, and I want to play with those things. And I think something that's arising from working with all of this, like this collection of things for my family, is realizing that I want to represent it also within this like multidisciplinary approach with like a collection of things. So like you were saying, there's like, I have a bunch of photos that are just cakes, like my mom's wedding cake, my birthday cakes. We have all these cake photos. So I'm hoping to reproduce those. And I'm also hoping to create these paintings, and alongside video work, I'm also starting a conversation with my grandmother about her story crossing the border. And I want to find a way to see where I am within all of those stories, and seeing where even Griselda might fit. inside of there too.
Yeah, I think it's a great point to end the conversation on this note, and maybe Violet can come back. Thank you.
Thank you both so much. That was incredible. Yeah, thank you to everyone who tuned into this conversation, to our lovely panelists, as well as all the participating artists in the exhibition, A Shapeshifter with a Heavenly Secret. Again, the exhibition is currently viewable on the White Columns website, whitecolumns.org. So if you haven't seen it yet, go click through. Thanks again to Tamara and Denisse for taking part in this conversation. Yeah, good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.